Good afternoon, all. Doing something, well, it won't be different, but it'll be slightly different. It won't look any different. It might feel different, but it's the truth. That's the main thing. It's the truth. How many of you are old enough to remember Sly and the Family Stone? Mention something in the world, everybody's hands go up and they start going crazy. Well, it is what it is. Anyway, there was a song that they used to sing. There was quite a few of them, but this one in particular kind of jumped out at me last night, and I says, well, we'll deal with it, because I think it's relevant. But before we get to that, let's get to what's real. Let's drop anchor. Philippians, the second chapter, the first verse. And maybe you'll understand where we're going with this. Philippians, the second chapter, the first verse, where it says, if then there is any encouragement in Messiah, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of spirit, if any affection and compassion, make my joy complete by being of the same mind, having the same mind, one in being and of purpose, doing none at all through selfishness or self-conceit, but in humility. Consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. For let this mind be in you, which was also in Messiah Yeshua, who being in the form of Elohim, did not regard equality with Elohim a matter to be grasped or something to be gone after, as we've seen that other being do, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, and came to be in the likeness of men. And having been found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, death even of a stake. Elohim, therefore, has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name. That at the name of Yeshua, every knee should bow, of those in heaven and of those in earth, and of those under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Yeshua, Messiah, is Master, to the esteem of Elohim, the Father. Now, getting back to that song, show you what happens to old records. Remember that one? I want to thank you. Be myself. Notice the spelling, myself. Again. We're all here today to preside over the death of a king. I'm sure we heard of this king long ago in a song by Sylvester Stewart, or who used to know as Sly Stone. In the song, he said, I want to thank you for letting me be myself again. Well, friends, according to the word of Elohim, I announce the death of King Myself. King Myself was born a king. Why? Because his ego said so. He felt he had to be. Now, bad thing about that, we're all self-centered by nature. It's just the way we are. It's not the first thing you think of, wow, I want to do something for Miss Ruby over there. No, I think I should do something for Lenise over there before I do it for myself. That would be nice to think that way. But that's not the natural nature of the human beast. It's just the way it is. Because you see, we needed a mind transplant. That's really kind of slowly what's happening with that Holy Spirit that sits in the crown of your head. It's slowly transforming your mind away from yourself and toward others. We need, in other words, the mind of Messiah. You see, the mind of Messiah is a selfless mind. Let's go to Philippians again, the 2nd chapter. Let's go to the 4th verse. You leave it there, it'll be there, because we're going to be back and forth there pretty much for the rest of the day, so keep a finger there, and I think it'll make things move along a little bit faster. Philippians, the 2nd chapter, the 4th verse, where it says, each one should look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. For let this mind be in you, which was also in Messiah Yeshua, who being in the form of Elohim did not regard equality with Elohim as a matter to be grasped. Because you see, nothing is empty as a totally self-centered life. Notice a person that all they talk about, the first, be aware of this. And sometimes the people aren't even aware of it themselves. The first thing comes out of them, well, I was, and then I, well, first me, I thought I ended, and it was, why not me? Be careful. That person is like a glass of water with no water in it. There's nothing as empty as a self-centered life, and there's nothing as full as a life that is centered in Master Yeshua Messiah. You see, the purpose of our lives is not to find freedom as this world declares it. And notice when they declare it, be careful, because once they have to declare that you're free, you can be sure of one thing: you're not. But to find our master is the ultimate. Why? Because when we find our master, we will find true freedom. John, the 8th chapter, the 36th verse. If you find it there, you'll see that it says, if then the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. Therefore, we have to find one mind, just as the body of Messiah. Going back to Philippians, the 2nd chapter, the 2nd verse, he says, make my joy complete by being of the same mind, having the same love, one in purpose and of being, doing none at all through selfishness or self-conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. It's appropriate for us to have a good self-image. You have to believe in yourself. You have to know who you are, and you have to know where you're headed and know what you're all about. That is real. Because if you're going to love others as you love yourself, how can you love others if you don't love yourself? There's a logic to this that is inescapable, yet the world just doesn't seem to find it. Either they find it in the wrong proportion, or they just forget about it altogether. It's just the way it is. But we must be humble, as the Messiah was humble. But the secret of humility is to think of others first. But in order to think of others first, you kind of have to have a healthy understanding of who you are. But you have to think of others first. Philippians, the 2nd chapter, the 4th verse. Each one should look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. You see, we are to love one another. That's the center of this whole thing in terms of how we are brought out. If you look at the 10 Commandments, the first 4 are toward God, toward Elohim, toward the Godhead, toward those who are bigger than us, who created us, who made us what we were to be. Not necessarily what we became, but certainly what we were to be, and what, if we remain and return to him in full, what we will certainly return to being. But we are to love one another. John, the 13th chapter, the 34th verse. John, the 13th chapter, the 34th verse, where it says, "A renewed command I give to you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this shall all know that you are my taught ones, if you have love for one another." You see, we are to receive one another also as believers. Notice what it says in Romans, the 15th chapter, the 7th verse. "So accept one another, as Messiah also did accept us, to the esteem of Elohim." Best example I saw was in Acts, the 16th chapter, the 11th verse. We have to do this, as did the whole household of Lydia. And you'll see that there was a reason for that kind of defied them doing it, but they did it anyway. Acts, the 16th chapter, the 11th verse, where it says, "Therefore, sailing from Troas, we ran a straight course from Samothrace, and the next day came to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is the principal city of that part of Macedonia, a colony. And we were staying in that city for some days. And on the Sabbath day, we went outside the city by a river where there used to be prayer. And having sat down, we were speaking to the women who met there." Women meeting there? You see, there's nothing wrong with that. There were no men there. There were only women, so somebody had to rise up and teach. Am I correct? So obviously it did happen, all in proper form. And having sat down with the women who met there, and a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple from the city of Thyatira. That's not the normal person that you'll see dealing with the word of God. Somebody is selling purple. Now, wait a minute, what does that mean? Back then, that meant something. Dyes in cloth were hard to come by, reasonably expensive. And the most expensive because it only came from one particular mollusk that came from a part of Africa that everybody couldn't get to. So even if you had purple clothing, that meant something. Who usually wore purple clothing? I know, not Prince. But that's why. But usually you had to be royalty, or at least had to be wealthy, because it was a very hard color to come by. But this Lydia sold purple clothing, purple linen. A seller of purple from the city of Thyatira, worshiping Elohim. Odd to see somebody with money that actually seriously worships Elohim. Worshiping Elohim was hearing whose heart the master did open to pay attention to what Paul said. Now notice here, was probably a Gentile by birth, converted to Yeshua. And when she was baptized or immersed in her household, she begged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be believing in the Master, come to my house and stay." And she urged us, which was a little bit out of the way also, because if you were in Thyatira during this time and you were worshiping Elohim, you were ostracized. You were not, she's one of them, you know. So to invite someone into your house, that brought attention to you, which means you didn't care. You were doing this not out of fear, but out of love. Verse 16, and she urged us, and it came to be, as we went to prayer, that a certain slave girl possessed with the spirit of Putan did meet us, who brought her masters much profit by foretelling. Having followed Paul and us, she cried out, saying, "These men are the servants of the Most High Elohim, who proclaim to us the way of deliverance." Which seems like a cool thing, except that nobody else liked it, so her pointing that out made them stand out like sore thumbs, if you will. So for those who think that that's a good thing, that would be like going out and saying that you were doing this and they had just declared that anyone doing this in this city was going to jail and possibly worse. Verse 18, and she was doing this for many days. But Paul, greatly annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, "I command you in the name of Yeshua Messiah to come out of her." And it came out of her that same hour. But when her masters saw that their anticipation of money making was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them out into the marketplace to the rulers, as if they were looking for a reason. Now they gave them one. And having brought them to the captains, they said, "These men, being Judeans, greatly disturb our city. And they proclaim practices which are not right for us to receive nor to do, being Romans." And the crowd rose up together against them, and the captains tore off their garments and commanded them to be beaten with rods. And having laid many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, commanding the jailer to keep them safely, who, having received such a command, put them in the inner prison and fastened their feet to the stocks. In other words, keep them here. We got more stuff we gonna do to them, because they believe in that Yeshua, this should show the people are doing this out of their own hearts. They don't care anymore. After all, they had already killed their leader, Yeshua. They had already hung him, but allegedly he came back to life. So that kind of left people in a state of fear somewhat. So anybody that believed in them, that they could find something against them, they threw them in jail, beat them, killed many, and this is what went on. Verse 25, and at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing songs to Elohim in prison. This is the attitude. This is the attitude to have. At midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing songs to Elohim, and the prisoners were listening to them. And suddenly a great earthquake took place, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken. And immediately all the doors were opened, and all the chains shook loose. And the jailer, awaking from sleep and seeing the prison doors open, thinking the prisoners had fled, drew his sword and was about to kill himself to avoid the rush, because surely once the jailer found out that these men were gone, these would have been killed. This man knows the first one they would have killed was him, because nobody was going to believe, "Oh, what happened, sir? Oh, an earthquake came, and all of a sudden the shackles just broke off of them, and the doors unlocked, and they were set free. Yeah, right. Off with his head. He knew what was going to happen. But Paul called with a loud voice, saying, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." And asking for a light, he ran in and fell down trembling before Paul and Silas. And having led them outside, he said, "Master, what do I have to do to be saved?" You all just saved my life. What do I have to do to become one of you? He saw that earthquake. He saw something he'd never seen before. A door that he locked with the key suddenly unlocked itself and flew open. And these men didn't even leave. They saved him by staying there. So he says, I want to be saved beyond this, because this is something beyond my understanding. This is something that I don't get. But there's got to be something real there, because I saw it happen. And they said, "Believe on the Master, Yeshua Messiah, and you shall be saved, and you and your household." And they spoke the word of Elohim to him and to all who were in this house. And taking them in that hour of the night, he washed their wounds, and immediately he was baptized. And he and all that were his. This man went and brought his whole family in. And having brought them into his house, he set food before them, and he rejoiced with all his household, having believed in Elohim. These examples are here for us. It could come to this at one point for us. You see this, we are expected to do these things when possible, and when these situations may arise or come to us in the future, as it is obvious that something is going on in the world right now. Don't expect it to all come up on the news or on television, because they don't know what's happening. They want to know what's happening before they can tell you, so they can spin it in such a way to make you think the way they want you to think. So they're not necessarily going to tell you what's happening, but there's an ecumenical church movement that's slowly coming together on us right now. And it's happening in a way that many of them will not be in agreement with our beliefs. And they certainly will not be agreeable with the Sabbath of Elohim. At this time, we must also be careful as to whom we associate with. 2 John, the 10th chapter. 2 John, the 10th chapter, where it says, "If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching," 2 John, there's only one chapter, the 10th verse. "If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house, nor greet him, for he who greets him shares in his wicked works." Two things might happen. Number one, you'll be assumed to be associating with them, and if they see anyone that does believe as we believe, sees us associating with, they may assume that we may be one of them. Especially when it turns around that they smile in our faces and turn us in. But you got to understand that there's going to come a time when, oh wow, we want our building, we need a building. There's going to come a time when that's the worst place to be, because everybody else is going to be in house churches, because that's the safest place to be, because everybody doesn't automatically know who you are and what you're doing. These things may happen. We think, oh, it's so horrible. Oh, we could have had so many more people at the university church. You might have been pushed out of there for a reason. And we don't always understand that reasoning, and we don't see it, because everything doesn't come to you in this eternal now. Everything doesn't come to you all of a sudden at once. And you realize, wow, Sometimes things happen at what was now then, because God, in his eternal now, knows what's happening at all times and knows what's going to happen in the future and sets you up at a time in your past for something that's in your future that you didn't see yet, because you're not in his eternal now. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. But we must test and be sure of all of our beliefs, knowing the true beliefs of others as well. Because sometimes people will twist things and throw it in and say, that's what's in the Bible. Don't you know that? And you go in there and find it, and guess what? It's not there. John, the 4th chapter, the 1st verse. John, the 4th chapter, the 1st verse. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are from Elohim. For many false prophets have gone forth into the world. By this, know the spirit of Elohim. Every spirit which confesses that Yeshua Messiah has come in the flesh is from Elohim. And every spirit which does not confess that Yeshua Messiah has come in the flesh is not from Elohim. And this is the Antichrist, which you heard is coming, and now is already in the world. Little children, you are of Elohim, and have overcome them, because he in you is greater than he in the world. They are of the world. Because of this, they speak of the world, and the world hears them. We are of Elohim. The one knowing Elohim hears us. That's why you have to make sure you know what you're talking about. They will hear you. There's a time coming when, once this ecumenical thing has fallen to the point where people have made a decision because they know which is which, we have to be able to explain to them exactly what we believe. They say, we are of Elohim. The one knowing Elohim hears us. Make sure they hear something that is of this book. Whoever is not of Elohim does not hear us. From this, we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. And yes, there is a difference. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is of Elohim. And everyone who loves has been generated from Elohim and knows Elohim. The one who does not love has not known Elohim, because Elohim is love. By this, the love of Elohim was revealed in us, because his Son, the only begotten Messiah, has sent into the world that which we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved Elohim, but he loved us and sent his Son to be a propitiation relating to our sins. Beloved, if Elohim so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has seen Elohim at any time. If we love one another, Elohim abides in us. And his love, having been perfected in us, by this we know that we abide in him and he in us, because of his Spirit. He has given the Spirit to us. And we beheld and bear witness that the Father has sent the Son as Savior of the world, something that even a lot of his people haven't accepted yet. Whoever confesses that Yeshua is the Son of Elohim, Elohim abides in him. And when it says confesses the Son, that means not only believe in him, but also obey his laws, keep his commandments, do the things that he told us to do in life. Not just say, oh, I believe in him. I believe in this light bulb. I believe it gives light. I believe it illuminates me. But it's just a light bulb. And I see it. Therefore, it's not hard to believe it. When I don't see it and I do believe it, now you're doing something. Now you got something going. Now you're working from the side of the street he wants you working from. Whoever confesses that Yeshua is the Son of Elohim, Elohim abides in him, and he in Elohim. And we have known and have believed the love which Elohim has in us. Elohim is love. And the one abiding in love abides in Elohim, and Elohim in him. By this, love has been perfected with us, that we have confidence in the day of judgment, that as he is, we are also in this world. In other words, we're all set up. All we have to do is follow it through. All we have to do is follow it through. And whatever he is now, spirit, eternal, invisible, so we will also be. Verse 18, there is no fear in love. Don't miss this. But perfect love casts out fear. Because fear has punishment, and the one fearing has not yet been perfected in love. We love him because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love Elohim, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For the one not loving his brother whom he has seen, how is he able to love Elohim who he has not seen? And we have this commandment from him that the one who loves Elohim also loves his brother. If you love your brother, you're not going to sell your brother out. In this truth, we are to greet one another. 1 Corinthians 16:12 speaks of greeting each other with a holy kiss. In other words, our love for one another must be real. It should be personal, which means that there should be conversation where you can talk about anything and it's not a problem, and you're not going to worry that somebody's going to go, hey, did you hear about what Devella said? End that nonsense. End that nonsense now, or it might cost you your salvation. That love must be real. It must be personal. It should be impartial. Well, you know, I like them because they got money, but they poor, so no. End that now. All should be treated equitably. That love should be thoughtful, should be friendly. We are here to care for one another in faith and in truth. Why? Because stressful times are coming. The only ones that we'll be able to be real with are each other. That time is coming. Why not start working on it now? For the world is going to be following Satan in fullness once they have no choice, because he doesn't generally make you do it by, oh, well, I think I'll do that today. No. He's usually doing it with a sword to your neck, with a gun to your face, with all your neighbors standing outside your house with pitchforks and staves. This is the way he does it. He does it by force. He doesn't allow you. Remember that freedom they were talking about a little while before? Smell like freedom now? Didn't think so. This is what I'm saying. Don't be fooled by this world. It is not real. The only hint that we will have of its falseness will be its complete dismissal and disagreement with anything truly of the Bible, anything biblical, anything from the word of Elohim. We, however, so that we'll know the difference, must know what the true word says and know those who truly believe it. 1 Corinthians, the 12th chapter, the 25th verse. 1 Corinthians, the 12th chapter, the 25th verse. That there be no division in the body, but that the members might have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. And if one is glorified, all the members rejoice with it. And you are Messiah's body and members in part. We are to endure with one another, not against one another. Ephesians, the 4th chapter, the 1st verse. Ephesians, the 4th chapter, the 1st verse, where it says, "Then I, the prisoner in Messiah, exhort you to walk worthily of the calling in which you were called, with all humility and meekness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love, being eager to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace." In other words, if something does go wrong, we are to forgive one another. Ephesians 4, go to the 32nd verse. "And be kind to one another, tenderhearted, having forgiven one another, even as also Elohim forgave you in Messiah." You see, seeing all of this in focus as we have to go back to myself. Myself. You put that together fast and it makes more sense. Myself. I want to thank you for letting me be not myself, but myself through Messiah. What are the marks of a selfish life? You see, King Myself has self-will. He says, "My will, not thy will, be done." You know, that's problem with that. We've heard that before. Where do we hear that? Isaiah, the 14th chapter, the 13th verse. Isaiah, the 14th chapter, the 13th verse, where you had somebody else that had that big head like myself, says, "For you have said in your heart, I will go up to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of Yahweh. And I will sit in the mount of meeting in the sides of the north. I will rise over the heights of the clouds. I will be compared to the Most High." But note the attitude of Messiah himself when faced with the stake of death for our redemption. He put himself last. Let's go to Matthew, the 26th chapter, the 39th verse. Matthew, the 26th chapter, the 39th verse, where it says, "And going forward a little, he fell on his face, praying and saying, My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet, not as I will, but as you will." John, the 5th chapter, 30th verse. John, the 5th chapter, the 30th verse, where it says, I am able to do nothing from myself. I am able to do nothing from myself. Just as I am, just as I hear, I judge. And my judgment is just. For I do not seek my will, but the will of the one sending me, the Father. If you notice, King myself is constantly self-seeking. It's all about myself. It's all about me. It's all about what I want. It's all about my own glory. It's all about my own pleasure rather than Elohim's glory. Yet what does Yeshua say in John, the 8th chapter, the 50th verse? But I do not seek my glory. There is one who seeks and judges. And it's not myself. You see, King myself is self-assertive. He is not concerned about theology. It's about meology. It's all about me. It's who I am, what I want, what I do. Worship me. Somebody else said that. They will worship me. Satan, the devil, said that. And he said somewhere, you heard him somewhere singing, I want to thank you for letting me be myself again. Okay, you see, we went through this whole 60s revolution not realizing how rooted these things were in selfishness, arrogance, me, all about me. That whole 60s thing, we all did it. We all went through it, some phase of it. It slipped down to the 70s. It got to the 80s. By the time it hit to the 90s, they were going at your kids by then. Just like they are now. The kids are fully enveloped in it now. They're telling you, Mommy, you're wrong. This is what we should be doing. You've even got books saying, children will teach you how to raise them. It'll teach you how to raise them. I'm sure it will. And after it's done, you look in the mirror and think, what did I just do? Here's what it is. Myself, King myself, is self-indulgent. He's motivated by self-desire, not by principles. However, when he is wrong, King myself is full of self-pity. He's going to look for attention. By now, he's not in king now, something went wrong, so he's going to exaggerate his sorrows, and he wants you to feel sorry for him. Oh, it's okay. It's going to be all right. You're going okay. Yeah, it's all right. Things go wrong. It's not your fault. King myself, after all, is self-conscious. He exaggerates his sorrows, and he is self-deprecating because he will pout and is easily wounded, but he wants everybody to feel sorry for him. Once he gets back on his throne, all of a sudden now, he's always putting himself down so that others will constantly lift him up. Oh, it's all right. You're going to be all right. Tomorrow it's going to be all right. You're going to be better. It's not your fault. It's a great thing you did. Yeah, sure, the whole eastern seaboard is polluted and all, but it was a great thing you did. Sending all of that you told us that, clean up the houses by dumping the garbage into the sea, and you remember what you said about Fukushima? You said, just let the water go. It'll be all right. The Pacific, we didn't need the Pacific Ocean anyway. You know. He is one of the worst forms of pride because he never does anything wrong. It's always somebody else. It's somebody else's fault. King myself is self-exalting. He's constantly praising himself. They claim to be self-made, and then they come among us and claim to worship the Creator. You smell them out right away. You see, King myself is always self-justifying. He's never wrong and can never apologize. Has no failures. Even when he's found wrong, well, maybe I said it wrong, but I really meant this. King myself is self-confident. He says, I can do all things on my own. Rather than like Paul, who says, I can do all things through Messiah. But you have to learn and understand, and sometimes you have to learn it the hard way. Sometimes you have to learn it the hard way like Peter did. Luke, the 22nd chapter, the 31st verse. Luke, the 22nd chapter, the 31st verse, where it said, and Yeshua said, Simon, Simon, behold, King myself has desired you, that he may sift you as wheat. You see the parallel, I made a little change there. But I have prayed for you that your faith fail not. And when you are converted, strengthen your brothers. And he said to him, Master, I am ready to go with you, both into prison and into death. And notice his answer. He said, I say to you, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day before you shall deny me 3 times. You see, we have to remain humble, or King myself will rise anew in us all. Notice how this ended. Go down to verse 54. And learn the lesson of verse 54. And laying hand on him, they led him away, leading Yeshua away, and brought him into the high priest's house. And Peter followed afar off. And lighting a fire in the middle of the court, and they sitting down, Peter sat in their midst. And a certain slave girl saw him as he sat by the fire and earnestly looked on him. You ever see, you sit out somewhere and see somebody just kind of staring at you like, yeah. Looked on him and said, this man was with him also. And he denied him. Woman, I do not know him. And after a while, another saw him and said, you also are one of them. And Peter said, man, I am not. And about an hour afterward, another confidently affirmed, truly, this one was also with him. For he is a Galilean. And Peter said, man, I do not know what you say. And immediately, while he still spoke, the cock crowed. And Messiah turned and looked on Peter, and Peter remembered the words of Yeshua, how he had said to him before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. But this is the attitude that he wants from us. Philippians again, the 4th chapter, the 13th verse. I can do all things through Yeshua who strengthens me. You see, the mind of Messiah is a serving mind. He's not thinking first of himself. He's thinking, what can I do for others with this power that I've amassed unto myself? How many rich people you know to think, wow, I got this money now. How many people can I help? How big a safe can I put it all in and keep them from getting it? No, that's not the way. That's not the way. Philippians, the 2nd chapter, the 5th verse. For think this within you, which mind was also in Yeshua Messiah, who subsisting in the form of Elohim thought it not robbery to be equal with Elohim, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, having become in the likeness of men. You see, Elohim made us to serve him and others. That was what we were created for, not necessarily in this skin, but in the skin to come. That's all you're going to be. Because when you have access to everything and have power to create everything, why would you want to keep it all to yourself? You give it to others. You expand yourself out to others so that everybody has what you have. What God is doing for us, what Elohim is doing for us, understand this. When you go in that grave, when you come up, you're going to come up with the same powers he has. Not his authority, but by then we have come to that state of humility where you're not looking at, I want what he's got. You've got everything but the position. You're not going to be 24 hours a day doing what he said do. You're going to have time to do whatever you choose to do within yourself. But you're going to also be wise enough to recognize that whatever you do for yourself, you're not even going to think about, wow, what can I do for me? What else can I do for them? What else can I do for the universe? And not the way we say it now, oh, don't put that out in the universe. No. Throw that away. You think, what can I do for anyone who has a need? When you get to that point, you'll understand fully what he means here. The mind of Messiah is a sacrificial mind. Verse 8, and having been found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of a stake. You see, Yeshua laid down his life for us. Ministry that costs nothing, accomplishes nothing. Elohim will have a specific ministry for each one of us in the end times. Beware that no one allow anyone else to tell you that they know what that ministry is, for they all will be liars. But they will come to you and say such things, trying to derail the saving plans of Elohim in the tribulation to come. You see, you got to understand something. When we're on the throne, King myself, Messiah, remains on the stake. However, when Messiah is on the throne, we are on the stake. But if we went on the stake just as he did, what happened in the end? We rise up. We must deny and crucify King myself. Romans, the 7th chapter, the 18th verse. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good. For to wish is present with me, but to work the good I do not find. Romans, the 6th chapter, the 11th verse. So also you count yourselves to be truly dead to sin, but alive to Elohim and Yeshua Messiah, our Master. Then do not let sin reign in your mortal body to obey it in its lusts. Neither present your members as instruments of unrighteousness to sin. In other words, don't go out there doing things that you know are wrong and thinking, ain't nobody gonna know. I ain't heard nobody but myself. Even the sin that they say that sexual sins that you do unto yourself, you're sinning to yourself. But present yourselves to Elohim as one living from the dead, and your members instruments of righteousness to Elohim. For your sin shall not lord it over you, for you are not under law, but under grace. What then shall we sin because we're not under law, but under grace? Let it not be. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves as slaves for obedience, you are slaves to whom you obey, whether of sin to death or obedience to righteousness? To obedience to what? The law, the commandments. Verse 17. But thanks be to Elohim, you were slaves of sin, but you obeyed from the heart the form of doctrine to which you were delivered. And what was that doctrine that you were delivered? The law, the commandments. So for those who say, oh, it's done away. Well, what were you learning? What were you taught? Oh, we threw that away. You should have jumped with it. Verse 18, and having been set free from sin, you were enslaved to righteousness. I speak as a man on account of the weakness of your flesh. For as you presented your members as slaves to uncleanness and to lawless acts, unto lawless act, so now yield your members as slaves to righteousness unto sanctification. It's time to think of the truth of Elohim and understand that we're heading into rougher times than these. We must know this, and we must know this word solidly, or there will be folk out there who will, and believe me, there's some folk out there smart enough to do it, separate us from it. There's nothing in this world that can raise us from the dead. Anybody heard of anything like that? Oh, I hear Ray Kurzweil and some of these folk talking about it, but I haven't seen anybody walking around that can show you what it was like on the other side. Oh, you hear all these stories about, oh, I saw a light. Heck, I turned on the light, I see a light. It don't mean I died and came back. Get real. Therefore, there can be nothing in this world that is more important than our relationship with Elohim. That means, remember those shirts we had a few years ago at the feast that talked about the death of self? This must mean the death of self, the death of King myself. Why? Because we want to see a resurrection of us all. Oh, she wasn't back there. Okay. Even with a heart like ours, we want this.
Of all the hearts because